This lesson is all about blues phrasing. Now, one of the things I realized early on was that my favorite blues guitarists were also my favorite blues singers. And it made me realize that the way that they heard melodies for the music were the same ways that they heard licks on their guitar. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at a basic 12-bar blues, how we structured it in the last 12-bar blues lesson, which I'll put a link to before. And we're going to actually pull apart the sample. So I'm going to play the solo for you. The PDF is actually linked below, as well as a link to the backing track. And then we're going to talk about how this makes sense. So if you look at your PDF here, I'm just going to put it up on the screen. We actually have the 12-bar form divided up into 3 4-bar phrases. And one of the things we can do, and this is what we did in the previous lesson, is we went through and we used Every Day I Got the Blues by B.B. King as an example. The idea here is that we take the first 4 bars. Well, every day I've got the blues. That's one phrase. The next 4 bars starts on the 4 chord. Every day I've got the blues. That's the second phrase. And then the last phrase, if you see me worrying, you know you I hate to lose. That's kind of the punchline. The thing is that even once I'm done with the first chorus, I move on to a second or third chorus. I'm still thinking about this question and answer phrase structure. It's just I'm playing busier stuff. And that's going to be a future lesson, basically, is how we're going to look at this, but we're going to elevate where we're at from here. We're just talking about first choruses or single choruses in this lesson. So the first phrase here, that's kind of firmly in the whole B.B. King voice box area of the fretboard. And there's a link to a lesson called the B.B. King voice box down below. But the thing is, with that little part of the fretboard, it becomes easy to play phrases that make sense in this format. So this is the 6th note of the scale, of like a major pentatonic scale. It's going 6, root, root, 6. So we're not ending on the root. It kind of gives it a question kind of vibe. It doesn't feel very resolved. But when I play the next part, I'm ending on the root, which actually gives me more of a sense of resolution. It doesn't have to work that way all the time, but in this context, it gives you an idea of how I'm thinking when I'm actually trying to make these question and answer phrases work in a way that fits the ear. And ultimately, your ear is what should tell you if the stuff is working. So you'll notice that's a half step bend right there. At that point, I'm playing over the 4 chord, and we don't have a major third there. We've actually got the G, which is the minor 7th of the A chord. You're going to see why that becomes important in the next line. So the second phrase, what we're doing is we're fitting it to the 4 chord by playing the first batch of notes here in the minor pentatonic scale. If you haven't seen this idea before, one easy way to make changes happen in blues is to play major pentatonic over the 1 chord, minor pentatonic over the 4 chord. That is yet another lesson. We're not going to get into that, but that's essentially what I'm doing right here. And that's how I'm actually making the second phrase sound different and develop. All right, so those notes also could be played down here on the first string. And that's typically where I would play it, but I've got it tabbed up here so that you could actually bend easier if you're kind of a new blues player or a new string bender. Now, the first part of it, the question, is in the minor pentatonic. All right, and that doesn't feel particularly resolved. I'm ending on the G, which is the minor 3rd of E. It's just kind of there. It's also the 7th of the A. But then when I come back to the answer is in a place that resolves better. And I hope you're seeing a theme here. Even the last bend right? That's a major third, right? That goes all the way up to the G sharp. So that kind of resolves to a chord tone. For the third phrase, we're starting off with the punchline. And the punchline, this is kind of the payoff, right? We go from the 5 chord to the 4 chord. And then after that, we're going to go into the turnaround. But that's kind of a cool lick that I've stolen mostly out of a Chuck Berry solo, the intro to Johnny Be Good. But you also hear like Stevie Ray Vaughan. Yeah, you hear guys do that kind of thing all the time. And what it is we're playing that lick over the 5 chord. Right? And it fits the chord tones of that B7 chord really nicely. And then we're rephrasing a little bit to fit the 4 chord, and then we have the turnaround. This is kind of what wraps up the chorus but leads us back to the top for the next chorus. And we're actually starting 4 triplet 1. All right, to me that's the beginning of the turnaround, even though it's not really marked that way on the music. So go. And that last bit's kind of Freddie King-like to me. If you really pull this apart and you look at it and you listen to Freddie King tunes like Hideaway or The Stumble, you'll see probably where I've ripped a lot of this stuff off from. And you hear this kind of phrasing really well demonstrated. So one of the best things you can do is just go listen to a bunch of players play music, especially listen to the guys from the 60s, 50s, 60s, 70s, how they sing and then how they play guitar. That ends up being the jumping off point for a lot of the modern players. And I think if you're able to play that way and make sense in a real simple fashion, then when you want to ramp things up or head things more in your own direction, you've got a pretty good framework to work off of.